Welcome back. In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to define the CIDR blocks for your VPC. In the next lesson, we will be creating a custom VPC of our own, so we need to make sure we understand what CIDR block to use before we go there, so that we make sure from the start that we're going to have enough subnets and enough hosts per subnet. So let's have a look at defining CIDR blocks. So let's say we have a network address of 192.168.0.0. In this case, we have a 24-bit subnet mask, and that gives us 8 host bits, which is 256 addresses. The first address would be 0.1, the last address would be 0.254. Now, you can't necessarily use all of these addresses. AWS do reserve some, but the .0 address, so 192.168.0.0, is the network address. You can't ever use that for an IP address of a host. And the last address would be 255, and you can't use that because that's the broadcast address, an address used to broadcast to all IP addresses. Now, what if we have a /16 subnet mask? Now we have more than 8 bits. We've got 16 bits for the host portion, and that gives us 65,536 potential addresses, minus the few that are reserved by AWS. And this would be the first and last potential addresses. But we don't have to respect the boundaries of the octets themselves. We can have something called a variable length subnet mask. And in this case, what's happening is you can see here the subnet mask borrows 4 pieces from the host portion. So there's 4 bits used in the network portion and 4 bits of this particular octet used for the host bits, which gives 12 host bits. Now that means we get 4,096 addresses for that subnet. So this is when we're using classless interdomain routing with something called variable length subnet masks. Now there are a few rules and guidelines. Your CIDR block size can be between 16 and 28, so /16 and /28, and these are AWS rules. The CIDR block must not overlap with any existing CIDR block associated with the VPC. And you can't increase or decrease the size of an existing CIDR block. So really important there to understand. That's why we've got to get this right at the outset, because once you've launched a bunch of resources into your VPC, if you then realize that you want to change the CIDR block because you've reached some kind of limitation, it's going to be a real problem to do that. You can't do it natively. You'd have to migrate to another VPC. Now, the first 4 and last IP address are not available for use. They're reserved. And AWS recommend that you use CIDR blocks from those private IP ranges that we talked about earlier in the course. Those are the RFC 1918 ranges. So that's the theory and the guidelines. Let's go over now and have a look at a tool that we could use to help us define our VPC CIDR blocks. This tool is from the network00.com website, and it's the IPv4 subnet creator. Now what I'm going to do is put in 10.0.0.0. That's the overall CIDR block that I want to use, and I'm going to choose /16. What we do now is we define the number of hosts or the number of subnets that we want to have. So let's say I want to make sure that I've got lots of room in my subnet, so I want at least 4,000 hosts in my subnets. That's a pretty big number, but it gives us lots of flexibility for the future. Now bear in mind that will limit the number of subnets, so it's about getting a balance. But I'm going to choose create, and it now shows us that it's recommending we use a /20 subnet mask for the subnets we create. So that means my CIDR block is going to be 10.0.0.0/16. My first subnet will be 10.0.0.0/20. My second subnet will be 10.0.16.0/20. And then within each of these subnets will have a maximum of 4,094 hosts, minus the few addresses that are reserved by AWS. So I'm quite happy with that, and that's what I'm going to use in the next lesson when we create our custom VPC.